You okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a shir in the Sefer Tanya. We're holding in Perek Gimel, about the middle of the Omid Bar 14 in the printed Sefer. And this shir is taking place on Monday afternoon or Monday evening, Oyer Li Kof Aleph Shvat Tovshin Ein Beis. All right, so we saw the Alter Rebbe mapped out for us the Seder of the Koiches of the Nefesh, and he told us all about the Moichin, Chochma, Bina. He didn't go into Das yet, but he did say there are three Moichin, Chochma, Bina, V'das. And he said through the union of Chochma is to produce the first appearances of the Seichel from the mind in general. Then we saw Bina was the ability to reflect in depth, Mizbainen or Mamik Ma'id. And he deepened himself very much. But Gedulas Hashem, and we saw what is the content of that deepening, what is the actual theme of these bonanas that he reflects and he deepens his mind. But Gedulas Hashem Eichu Mamali Kol Almin Soiviv Kol Almin V'Kula Kamei Kaloi Chashivei. And we went into those, the explanation of those three levels. Mamal is the Ur Hanimtza B'Yislabshas B'Teicha Oilamas. The Soiviv is the transcendent Ur, which is beyond entry into the Kalim of the Oilamas, but nonetheless still has a certain relationship to the creative worlds. Akula Kamei Chalei Chashivei is the Ur Ein Seif, beyond even the Ur HaSeiviv, which is for what we might call Shaykh to Atzmas Ein Seif, and everything there is completely bottled and has absolutely nullified, has absolutely no significance. Kaloi, as if the nothing, Chashivi, it's reckoned. And then we saw that if a mensch deepens himself very deeply in the Hisbonenus, the usage of his power, and Koyach Habina, in these three levels and these three aspects of Hashem's revelation to us, then Noel Dov and Neseder Midas Yiras Haremamas B'Moichoi U'Machshavtoi Liro Olis Beishes Megidulos Yisbarach She'ein Lo Seif V'Tachlis. And then we saw Ufachad Hashem B'Liboy, and then it becomes the fear and the awe and the what you might call the dread of Hashem in his heart. So we saw that Yira is mentioned first by the Alter Rebbe as in the Seder of the Revelation at the Midas, even though earlier, a few lines back, he said that the Midas, as they come out of the Seichel, are Avu, Yira, and Tiferes. And here he mentions first Yira, and then we're going to deal with Ava in a minute. And he said that it's in Yira, it's Noel de Venesera, this Midah of Yira, B'Moichoi. And so he said in his brain. And so we pointed out that was a very profound type of Midah which is born inside, as it were, the brain. Because normally speaking, Midah means emotional traits, and they are relatable to the heart, and they're part of the emotions and the feelings of the heart. But here we saw that this Midas, the fear of the awe, more correctly spoken, the awe of the great elevation of Hashem, or that is a midah which is born in the moya, and it's in his brain, meaning in the koyach abina, and also b'makshavtei, that becomes busy in his thoughts, and in the letters and the sentence of his thoughts, he becomes swept away and taken in this midas of awe in the highest form for Hashem, and it brings him to liro, to have awe for Hashem, and to be lisboishes migdalose barach, to literally feel shame in the presence of Hashem's greatness. And in other words, this is the famous expression, the greatness of the Creator and the insignificance of the man. In other words, that once he realizes the greatness of Hashem in the Raimamus, the tremendous elevation and laudation of Hashem, then genuinely speaking, he realizes just how nothing he is. But he realizes how nothing he is to such an extent that he's almost ashamed of his own existence. And therefore, he's lisboishes, he's as it were ashamed of the greatness of the Eibishter, and we could say that that's also borne out in the famous stories which are told about the great Chassidim in previous generations, that when a genuine tzaddik, who he's like, and he's got a certain similarity to the Boyers brought down in Midrashim, when he used to come, people would run away and hide under benches, and they're not wanting to be seen by the Rebbe or the great tzaddik. A little bit different than nowadays. Everybody runs to look who wants the Rebbe to see him, etc. In the old days, they used to hide because genuine fear of elevation and laudation brings you to be ashamed of your own self, and not only ashamed, but to feel just how shameful and improper it is to show yourself in the presence of such a great greatness. And those of us who had the great privilege to go into Yechidus with the Rebbe and to be personally in the Rebbe's room and to speak with him, know very well what that feels like, the feeling of your own complete insignificance. But I personally was gifted to experience that on numerous occasions when I went in to speak with the Rebbe. However, that's just a form of an example, and that brings him to lisboishes migdal lasei yisbarach she'ein lo seif v'tachlis. Why would he be so? Why would he see himself so negatively and so unable to show himself, as it were, in front of the greatness of Hashem? Because he realizes that the Eibishter's greatness is in a way of ein lo seif, ein lo seif v'tachlis. It has no finality. There's no key point to it. It's just so unlimited and beyond all limitation that you can't really describe it as having any aim or finality. It's just absolute ein sof and infiniteness. What we have it's very difficult for us to picture the concept of infiniteness. We have Bekoishi, we have with great difficulty we can appreciate things which are great in size, as it's brought down in the Gemara Masechta Chagiga, that from one level of heaven to the other in the what's called over the seven heavens, it's 500 years of walking, and what it would take a mensch to walk in 500 years. That's the difference in space between these, or the difference in time and level between these. That's very hard for us to picture. How much more so if we're talking about ein lo seif v'tachlis, it has absolutely no limit or finality in its very essence. So that causes the mensch to have this yiras harim. And we spoke at some length in a previous class that the yiras harim is brought down in Sifrei Chassidus, in other places, that it's a very high level, it's a very high madrega. And here we seem to be talking about how a mensch is supposed to begin in Avodas Hashem. And we say that if he will be misbeinen, he'll do this and do that, immediately he will have yiras or awe of the Eibishter in the form of yiras hareimamas b'moichei. Well, that's a very delicate inyan that we say that the brain has got unbelievable capacity, that the brain is able to sense an emotional trait. In other words, that even though the brain is reasoning and a seichel, of a mitzat, that inyan of what we say when a person realizes the unbelievable greatness of Hashem, and he's just completely swept away, what happens to him is what's called bittul. And bittul is the nullification of the self. You just lose the whole sense of your own significance or being. That's what he said. He comes even to self-shame of the highest order. It might matter where you're aware that you no longer exist and that you've lost your whole state of being a significant being. You just don't have any state or significance whatsoever. So then you lose the whole state of your selfness, and that's called bittul. And that bittul is a form of an expression that only the brain can express, because the brain is the power that was given in the Eibster into a man, that he can sense and realize truth. It's not through the brain that we come to what's called emet. Since the brain is able to sense the concept of truth, and the concept of truth means that the Eibster is the only truth, and he's the only existence, and he's absolutely ein lo sefer tachlis, then you lose yourself altogether. You become self-nullified altogether. Well, that's called yiras haroimus, a form of fear and awe of the unbelievable greatness of Hashem. So even though that's a great madrega, what the Alter Rebbe is saying is that at the beginning of all genuine avodas Hashem, that we want to establish a person and help him along in the way. First of all, his blindness in this one and this in, and then he'll move to Ahava and then to other midas, which are soon going to be mentioned. The first thing is you have to lose yourself. You have to be in a state of bittul, and the Eibster helped that in the brain there's this feeling for the truth and the genuineness of Hashem's greatness, or that causes you to lose yourself. Or that's the inner of yiras haroimus, of the absolute nullification of the self, the absolute bittul of the self. Or then that's the passage through which you can pass from being a yesh and a matthias in this world, to think you're important, to think you have some sort of significant being to yourself. And then you'll be able to reach the other midas, which we're going to mention as we go along now. But that you're locked up in yourself, you can't really feel genuine emotional traits for Hashem, because really what you're doing is feeling yourself, and you're really concerned about yourself, and you're looking for how divinity and all sorts of things like Torah and mitzvahs and all good things connected with the whole Indian of Yiddishkeit, how that's for me good. That's going to be good for me. It will give me this. It's all for me. So the Alter Rebbe says that's not the way to really join up with Hashem and a way to appreciate Him and know Him. First of all, you've got to lose your own self. And that's what happens when you're mizbeinen in the greatness of Hashem, both in depth, mamik, ma'id, and then you sense the unbelievable laudation of Hashem. You lose your whole material. Oh, you've lost yourself. You're no longer there. Then that's the passageway to move in to the genuine feeling of love and other midas for Hashem. Otherwise, really, what you're doing is you're just loving yourself. And therefore, that's to go through. And therefore, every person has to have a certain trace with this yiras haroimus at the beginning. And a lot of people who've come to Yiddishkeit or become involved in one way or another after having not been so much at in the early stages of their existence, what that may be the reason for that, we don't know, or will tell you that they feel a certain point where they were just completely lost out of their previous matthias, and that's what gave them the power to move in and accept more genuine values in life. And that's called yiras haroimus, and that's what the Alter Rebbe is pointing out here. And therefore there's a famous little story that the Alter Rebbe's brother, the Maril, he had a brother called the Rebbeinu Yehuda Leib, the Maril, is that after the Alter Rebbe had the Tanya written, or it was given around, that was for a long time before it was printed. And the Alter Rebbe's brother asked him, how could you say that right from the very beginning, when a person begins to be mizbein, he has yiras haroimus? Well, this is a very, very high madrega. It's like the highest form of midah that one can imagine, yiras haroimus. And here you feel right in that that's the first thing. And the Alter Rebbe answered him that that's why I wrote the word nisoirah. Have you noticed that the Alter Rebbe says it becomes born? What born means that it's not produced by the seichel, but it's poured out from the seichel. And then he said, I used the word nisoirah. What nisoirah means, it becomes aroused. In other words, not that you've got it as a real, genuine midah, that's a great avodah. But at the beginning, and when you begin to understand and be mizbeinen in a real way at the beginning, it becomes awoken in you, this whole concept of Yerusalemus. And we can suggest that what the Alter Rebbe is trying to suggest with that is the concept of bittul, as I said before. He's aiming at this idea that through the intense usage of the mind and the depth of the mind in the unbelievable greatness, she'ein lo sof, ein lo tachlis, then it becomes aroused, this whole in, and that's enough to cause you to lose your whole self and then move on to deeper and better usages of the heart. And so therefore he goes on now further, the Alter Rebbe, and he says, v'shuv, and furthermore, or in following. The word shuv means after that, meaning following on from that, which means that once you've, as we said, once you've been misbeishes and misleader with the inif and yiras hareimamas, then you can move on, and then the heart becomes stirred with what we're going to see now, love of Hashem. Previous to that, you could also have love of Hashem without yiras hareimamas. You can have love of Hashem, but like we said before, you're more involved in your own feelings. You love Hashem, but really you love yourself. But you're really looking for that which is beneficial and better for yourself. Or once you've moved through this whole Indian of Yira, and you've gone into your heart also, but Pachad Hashem, you feel a genuine dread for Hashem in your heart, then it's possible to follow on. V'shuv yislahiv liboy bi'avo azo kerishpei eish. He said, then it will follow that his heart will flame up. Yislahiv liboy, with a tremendously brazen and powerful love for Hashem. The word azo means like almost like brazen or powerful. In other words, you'll become aroused with a burning and, how do you call it, incomparable love. Kerish peish, like the embers of fire. That's a lesson in Shir Hashirim. And in a way of v'chasheka, v'chafeitza, v'chuka, v'nefesh shoikecha, legedulas ein seif baruch hu. So, says the Rebbe, you get quite involved with Ava, that the Ava is stirred up like fire, which fire is connected with, usually with Gvura. Gvura is the opposite of Ava. Ava is connected with Chesed, and fire and Ava Azo and things of that nature would tend to suggest the concept of Gvura. So we're going to see a little bit further on. The Alter Rebbe is going to help us sort that one out by a certain phrase that he uses that could suggest that Chesed and love also connect with fire, not only Gvura. But here we could say that the feeling is so great that, as it were, it sweeps its own opposite into the field, and the Ava becomes strengthened almost by its own opposite, which is Gvura, fire, and Rish Be'esh, and then he feels a longing desire, which is Chasheko, that's a noun, an absolute noun from longing and desire. Chafetza is inner longing, that's the pnimis of the will, Chafetza. V'chuka is like a how do you call it, a longing for something that you can't possibly be without it anymore, Chuka. V'nefesh shoikecha, and your whole nefesh becomes a longing and yearning soul. You become completely taken over. Legedulas ein seif baruch hu. Now it's interesting, when he mentioned Yira, the Alter Rebbe, he said that you just feel the Yira from Gedulosei Yizborah, from the greatness of him, blessed be he. And then he just went on to say that one of the aspects of that greatness is ein lo sof v'tachlis, doesn't have any end or doesn't have any finality. Over here, the Alter Rebbe goes straight to it, and he says that the Ava, which expresses itself in these powerful ways, is because of the greatness of Ein Sof Baruch Hu. He calls the Eibishter Ein Sof. He doesn't give him one of the scriptural names of the Eibishter. He just calls him Ein Sof Baruch Hu, blessed be he. And he said, V'hi klois hanefesh, and that is like the expiry of the soul. So, I mean, this is pretty powerful stuff. I mean, if a mensch will hold him by clois hanefesh, that means he's almost going out, how do you call it, expiring, because of the he can't contain it anymore within himself, and he's just like, it's almost like a separation of the nefesh and the guf, clois hanefesh, the finishing and the going out of the nefesh. It's called in Yiddish an Ausgang, like a complete going out. So I mean, we seem to have, once again, we've been telling a mensch how to start and how to work. And first of all, we've given him Yuras Aroimamas, albeit Nisoyra, like the Alter Rebbe said. Yeah? And now we're giving him such madrigas in Ava, and these are very powerful in Yonim. So we could say in a sort of if we were in a courageous mood, we could say that what the Alter Rebbe means with all these four languages, Chasheka, V'chafeta, V'chuka, and a longing desire, V'nefesh Sheikeka, the Ligedulas Ein Seif Baruch Hu, V'hi Klois HaNefesh. That we could say that certain great people, they talk about the Tanya, bring this down. And they want to suggest that the four languages, Chashecha, Chafetza, Tshuka, V'nefesh Sheikeka, are talking about four different levels, as it were, within the revelation of Hashem. First of all, we saw three of them before. We saw Mamalik Kol Almin, Seiv Kol Almin, and then the which is a field higher than Seiv Kol Almin, Kula Kamei Kaloi Chashivei. Remember, that would be how do you call it? Chashecha would be to Mamalik, Chafeta to Seiv, V'chuka to the completely beyond. Is in what's Nefesh Shokeka? We have to say that Nefesh Shokeka is La'atzmusa is Baruch, Mamish to the Abish to Kipshutai, how is beyond all inyonim of revelation for himself, but Mamish to the Atzmus of Hashem itself, like a complete going out and a complete loss of yourself altogether. Only to the Abish, like the Alter Rebbe used the expression. You know the famous story that the Alter Rebbe said that when he was davening, and they used to have a special little corner where the Alter Rebbe would daven, a special room, and they built all sorts of cushions and other things around the wall, because the Alter Rebbe used to beat his head against the wall, you know, when he was davening, yeah. And he once wounded his forehead, so they built all sorts of things around the wall. He wouldn't wound himself anymore. And you know, it's brought down in the Shurish Mitzvah Satfilah and the Rebbe Tzemel Tzedek in Derech Mitzvah Secha. And it's also brought down in Maimon from the Rebbe Rashab in a slightly different way, that the Alter Rebbe said, I don't want you, you know, he said in Yiddish, Ich will nicht dein Gan Eden, ich will nicht dein Elam Habo, ich will mehr nische als dich allein. Yeah, you heard the story that the Alter Rebbe used to say, I don't want your Gan Eden, I don't want your Olam Habo, I only want you yourself. In other words, that's like cancelling out all possible rewards, all revelations that might come from Hashem. He wants only Hashem himself. So that's what we can suggest is going on here. Chafetza and all that's fine. Or then there has to be a nefesh, the whole nefesh is taken over in a longing and a yearning for Hashem in a way that he just reaches Klois HaNefesh. Klois HaNefesh means I just prepare to give everything out of myself only for the sake of being connected with Atzma Sein Tov. And that's maybe a hint here at the Alter Rebbe's theme that he used to say. He was heard quite often saying this in Yiddish. They used to say, "Ich will mehr nicht als dich allein." I only want you yourself. I don't want any none. There's a famous line from the Rebbe Melech Mashiach, in Toshel Lamed Aleph, on Yud Aleph Nisan. The Rebbe said this mimer on his birthday. Very famous mimer where he explains that whole thing on the part of the Alter Rebbe, that whole remark. Anyway, he's already holding by. He's already holding by Klois HaNefesh, the giving out of the soul altogether, because now he's reached Atzma Sein Tov. Once you reach Atzma Sein Tov, you just go out altogether and you lose yourself, and you don't want to exist anymore in this world. You're just so completely, absorbed in it. Like the famous story of the Alter with the Rebbe from Malach. You guys do know that story? You guys don't know any stories. I have to educate you a bit more on the stories. But there was the Alter Rebbe, when he first came to the Maggid, he became very friendly with the Maggid's son, called the Rebbe Avrom ben HaMaggid. And he was called Rebbe Avrom HaMalach, because he was so tremendously, in Ruchnis he was like an angel. But in Russia, that was in Poland, he used to be called Rebbe Avrom HaMalach. In Rusland, they used to call him Rebbe Avrom HaKodesh, which is even higher than HaMalach. But we won't go into that. Anyway, he was the most amazing person. So once he and the Alter Rebbe decided on a Seder where they would go into the forest, and they had there a small hut in the forest, which they called his Beide Stibel. His Beide, I didn't tell you guys the story a few days ago? I did. He's right. So they had his Beide Stibel, and they decided they're going to draw a circle on the ground. I told you guys the story. How come I told him? Maybe in our other class.
No, in this class.
In this class. Anyway, they agreed that they would. You had to go. If you go inside the circle, you have closer nefesh. You're going to go up to the Eivusha and give your nefesh out completely. If you step out of the circle, well, that means you're coming back down into the world. So they get into the circle and they start going up. And all of a sudden the Alter Rebbe sees that the Rebbe Avrom HaMalach, he means it to Syria. He means it, Kipshute, and that he's going out altogether, he's going to pass away. His soul is just going to go out and depart from his body. So the Alter Rebbe jumped out of the circle, which means that he came back down again. Well, that's what he intended anyway, by the way. But he came back down again, and he leant into the circle and he shouted at the Maggid. He said, it's written in the Mishnah, in Pirkei Avos, that Baal Kochach Atachoy, you are compelled to live, you are forced to live. It's not your choice. Nobody's asking you what you want. Baal Kochach Atachoy, you have to live. So when the Maggid heard that, when the Rebbe Avrom HaMalach heard that, the Alter Rebbe noticed that he sort of shouted a bit and everything, and then he started gradually to sort of show signs of returning to consciousness, and gradually he came back down. He also stepped out of the circle. And the Alter Rebbe said, listen, let's go back and rest up a bit. We go back to the shtibel. I'll rest up a bit. We've been through a very straining experience. And so they went back to his Beide shtibel. I didn't tell you guys the whole story. He knows it. He knows it. How come you guys don't know? Anyway, the Alter Rebbe washed his hands and ate a bagel with putter. And that was considered like a delicate sort of little way of eating in those days, particularly for people like the Alter Rebbe and the Rebbe Avrom HaMalach. To eat a bagel with putter was like, a bit sort of, posh. So he couldn't, the Rebbe Avrom HaMalach, he couldn't figure, how could you possibly, after an experience of giving away your soul completely to the Eivusha, you just sit down and eat a. So the Alter Rebbe said, that's what I want to teach you, that you've got to be able to be on two extremes. You've got to be able to give away your soul altogether, but you've got to be back down here in the world, and you have to even be able to eat a bagel. You have to be able to be in the world and look after your soul, and even if it needs to be looked after properly, you have to look after it properly, inside the body. The union of the soul and the body, and that's the ultimate tachlis. However, Klois HaNefesh is the other way. Closer nefesh means. So why would the Alter Rebbe write all this in? So we have to assume that I can make a suggestion, and we find all through Tanya, if we look carefully, both here and in the Geras HaTshuva and Shari the Graimuna, we look carefully, and we see that the Alter Rebbe called the Sefer Shel Beinonim. And a Beinoni is a middleman. He's not a tzaddik, he's not a Rasha, he's in the middle. And what you might call the average man. Or what you might call, in Yiddish there's an expression, der einfache Mensch, the ordinary or simple person. But the Beinoni can achieve a very, very elevated madrigas. He never becomes a tzaddik gomer, but he does become elevated. So therefore, what the Alter Rebbe with Tanya meant that it could be you're only an ordinary mensch. You're not a tzaddik. It could be your, how do you call it, einfacher Mensch. But you can achieve all sorts of things. If you can achieve those things, you've got to achieve them. In other words, the Tanya is not just helping a Bainani to realize his limitations. The Tanya is the other way. It's trying to show a Bainani what he can achieve and what is achievable. And if it is achievable, then it's got to be achieved. That's part of your duty and your aim in life, to achieve what you could achieve, even though you're not the perfect human being. That's what we consider. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe, when he starts mentioning what are he means, first of all, Yiras Aroim, now he's mentioning a tremendous level in Av, 3 different levels, 4 different levels in Av, to the Alter Rebbe's level of, I don't want your Gan Eden, I don't want, until this point of complete Klois HaNefesh, meaning that all of us, despite the fact that we're limited people and we're limited beings, we're only reading a Sefer Shel Beinanim, not a Sefer Shel Tzadikim, but we could reach these inyanim, and therefore we have to be told, we have to know what could be achievable, and therefore what has to be and should be achieved. And therefore the Alter Rebbe says that even though it's a high madrega and it looks to be aiming high, you got to know that the purpose of Ahava is first of all to lose yourself. Like we saw, first of all, Yira Saremas. And then after Yira Saremas, then Ahava in a way. So how could you possibly reach these madregas? Question mark. So that's what the Alter Rebbe said. I've already told you, got to lose yourself. Yira Saremas, excuse me, is bittul. Yira is bittul. You lost yourself altogether, and your Av is no longer mixed with your own self, but your Av is genuine love. For the Eibishter, it's genuine devotion and going out to Hashem. Oh, then you got a hope. Then you can reach, and you can go from one level to the other until you reach absolute devotion in Him and absolute giving away of the self altogether to Him in a form of what we might almost call Mesiras Nefesh. And therefore, it's brought down from the Rebbe, what the Rebbe observed in this particular inyan, that we see that Yira, for example, even though we talk about 2 levels in Yira Tatoa, Yira Ilo, simple Yira, and Yira Ilo, which means Yiras Aromas, like we saw here, a higher level in Yira, really, Yira Tatoa, the simple level of Yira, and the elevated level of Yira are really one thing. They're really connected together. Because Yira is bittul. As if you are poil on yourself in a simple way, and you have effort on yourself in a simple way, that you become botel, and you had it called, you lose your materials, then you're already holding by Yira deep inside. That cancellation of yourself is really Yira Eloah. It's just a question of reaching a certain level, and you'll have Yira Eloah. However, when it comes to Ava is divided into levels. Why? Because Ava is a feeling where the mensch, expresses himself, and he comes out and he wants to fulfill himself and he wants to be close because that's good for him. Yira is not as interested in what's good for him. He's just only interested in the awe of Hashem. Here, he's looking for his own, as it were, chafeto. It means a longing. Shokeko means a longing, a yearning. It's all things where the man's looking for, as it were. But he's doing it in a very high level of L'Shem Shamayim here. He doesn't mean it just for himself, but it is a form of an expression of the need of the soul. Ava is a form of expression. And therefore it's the self again, or you've come back shuv, you've come back into yourself, then you've got different levels. There you can talk about different levels, and there are different interdivided ways of loving Hashem. But Yira is all one thing, because Yira is bittul. Yira is this concept of self-nullification. And therefore once you've got a trace of bittul, you have all the madrigas of bittul. They're all hidden one inside the other. And therefore, that's what happens, that first of all, complete loss of the self, then all of these different levels to the point of Klois HaNefesh. And then, says the Alter Rebbe, I'll show you that this is the case. Kidiksiv, as it is written, Nixafo Vagam Kol So Nafshi. My soul longed, Nixafo means it longed, And it went out. Gam kosa, how do you call it? It literally reached a point of expiry almost. And like it's written in the Ebenezer over there, and tell him that kosa means we've gone beyond the normal level of yearning for something. When you've broken the line, that's what he says. Over es hakav. He's gone beyond the normal line. Well, that's called kosa. And then he says, uksiv toma nafshi lelikim. My my soul has thirsted for the Eibishter. Uksiv toma licho nafshi. But people from Chabad are familiar with that one. Toma licho nafshi v'goyma. So here we see three psukim that the Alter Rebbe brings. So once again, we can suggest that nixa for Gam Kol Sor is at a level of Ava, to the point of losing yourself altogether, but it's in a lower level of Elikus, which is shy to us. Ober, where you reach a level of Tzoma Nafshi, I'm thirsty, not just I'm emotionally aroused, but I feel like an insatiable longing, a thirst, is that's first of all Tzoma Nafshi Le'Elokim, to divinity in general. And then Uksiv Tzoma Licho, my whole thirst is only for you. Like the Alter Rebbe said, I don't want anything at all, I want only you yourself. But that's why we saw the infant Kula Kamei Chaloi Chashive, or even Atzma Saint himself, Tzoma Licho Nafshi. V'atzimoyen, and the union of thirst, he or who miyasod ha'eish, it's from the element of fire, shebenefesh elakis, u'kamoishakosu hativiyim, and like the natural scientists have written. So it's once again quite mind-boggling. What's the Alter go in here with a natural scientist, and he doesn't call them scientists or anything. He just calls them tiviyim, people that they try to work out the natural forces. Yeah, tiviyim, people got to do with teva. So yesh loma, that there's a rimaz hidden there, that the Alter Rebbe is telling us that Ava is different than Yira, in that Yira is awe, where you lose yourself, as I pointed out the whole time in this class. Ava is sof kosof, even when it's a high form of Ava, is something where the person is acting on a basis of a teva, of a natural thing. It's a natural, an expected thing in a human being to want your own benefit, to want something which will fulfill you, make you feel good, all that type of thing. Well, that's a natural thing. And therefore, the highest form of Ava is somehow or another still connected with the natural scientists. They can agree with you, and they can say, well, that type of fire that you feel in the artist, it's a natural thing. Mashiach, if Yira, he wouldn't say anything like that. A Yira is, the loss of the soul. Yeah, altogether. You see something humorous in that? No. So the union is that the Alter Rebbe expects of us huge achievements. And that's why he wrote the Tanya. He wanted to make you Bainim guys. He wanted to make it pretty high stuff. And so he tells you that Ava is tremendous and wondrous. You can reach Klesa Nefesh, but it's all you. It's got a bit to do with Teva. It's good. Why? Because if you get that type of Teva working in yourself, then that Teva conquers another type of Teva. Can you know what the name of the other type of Teva is, maybe? He's got a name. Very good. The Nefesh Abami, yes. He's Teva. Nefesh Abami is his Teva. If you work up this type of Teva, really go, that eats away at the Teva of the Nefesh Abami. That's why it's a good thing. Okay, thank you guys. Have a good day. And have a good evening, or whatever you're doing now. Now, we have a new...
7:45, right?
7:45.
You gonna be there?
Yeah, so I'll be there, please. Sure.